Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have actually a really massive balance update for Helldivers 2 that was a lot more important than I thought it was going to be. And in general, when we see big updates like this that really do change the way that the game plays, it's usually a really good thing. And today it's a really overwhelmingly good thing, pretty much across the board. So lighting this off, we're diving straight into what I think is the most important change this update, and I think that it just in the general direction that they're taking it is just going to keep getting better. So they reduce the time it takes for you to regain control of your character after ragdolling down from 0.8 to 0.5 seconds. And pretty much any time that there's an improvement or change to this, the game's just going to feel exponentially better to play. The reason that they added this stun in the first place was because of worm divers, which, like, honestly, it's really funny to see and it's really fun to play, but they obviously don't want the game to be that way. And this was the fix to stop that from happening pretty much overall. So when you account for things like, oh, like it's the host lagging that you're connected to because there's just somebody through every orbital in the game or whatever, sometimes when you get ragdolled, you really do feel pretty much just helpless, like you're sitting there basically just stun locked for basically forever every single time you get ragdolled onto the ground. So every single time that they make an improvement to this and they lower the time on it, the game is just going to keep feeling better and better to play. The devs also did have a little bit of a statement about this. In general, they want it to get even better than it is now, and hopefully they do keep improving this and lowering this down to the point where, like, you're just not stun locked when you hit the ground, basically, right? If they can get this down to like 0.3 seconds or even like 0.2, I think it's going to feel way better to play just across the board, especially when you get like chain ragdoll. This when you're fighting the factory strider convoy, I think that's the best possible way to describe it, is when you're just basically perma-locked on the ground. If that stops happening, the game feels better to play. And the bots are in, probably the best position they had been since, like, ever. Like, even better than launch state. So now they're just going to feel amazing to play, and as they lower it again, it's just going to keep getting better and better. So I think that this is the most important change and best possible direction that Helldivers could be going in, and I think Xbox divers are going to be getting in here and just having a great time overall, because they just want to keep making the game better. And again, this just was not what I was expecting to see, so I am happy they're paying attention to it. So the second biggest thing we could talk about in these patch notes is they fixed an issue where status effects were applying more than once, 4 times basically, like once per party member, or depending on like FPS and like lag and stuff, you could make something like the Scorcher even tick 3 times or 5 times for damage based on your FPS. This was a long time ago. They fixed that a while ago. But things like stun and even the pyrotech grenades to a certain extent were applying damage where their status effects more times in a 4-man. So I think the Force of Law Warbond actually would probably be a better way to talk about it, with a de-escalator like 6 shotting Bile Titans in that or whatever, and then solo it wouldn't. And from their dev clip, I'll run a little bit of it out.
I guess like we call it status effect, they call it network wonk.
Yes, well, which it was, to be fair.
And what the issue was that like we have a system that applies adds and like rolls basically for different status effects of like should this thing be stunned or be put on fire. The clients also tried to do the same thing that the host is supposed to do.
Right, so we're predicting for every client.
Yeah.
So 4 times the application if you're 4 players.
Yeah, sometimes. It depends also on the ping. But like everyone tried to get involved into that business, which the host didn't like. But it meant that you had slightly different experiences in like 4-player multiplayer lobbies compared to if you were alone.
It seems like they just want to standardize everything and bring solo up, and I think that's what I want out of the game. I want solo to be the exact same as 4-man. I don't want any weird shenanigans. I do wonder if this affects the Seeker grenades killing 4 enemies at a time, and the Hell Bomb also killing 4 enemies at a time or whatever. When you're in a 4-man, it like increases the amount of kills you get, which lets you like cheesy XP on the eradicate missions and stuff like that. So even though some things might feel a little bit weaker, I don't think they were ever intended to be that strong in the first place. And at a baseline, they're just going to get better. So if you're playing solo, the game's just going to be more fun across the board. I really like soloing, so this is a pretty big win for me. And we'll have to, again, we'll test everything out in a 4-man and we'll just see how everything feels. But again, I think that this is going to be a good change for the long-term health of the game, at least. just going in order here, they increased chest injury bleed damage from 1 to 10, and then chest injuries are now more noticeable. One thing to note is that the damage used to get rounded to 0 whenever you had the vitality booster equipped, so now that's not going to happen, and you are going to actually be taking some bleed out damage. We'll have to see how this goes, but you'll probably just stim as soon as you get hit most of the time anyways, because the second hit is usually when you're in lethal range to die. So maybe chest injury on the chest armor passive will get good eventually. I don't think it will. I don't think this is going to be relevant at all. But now you might just bleed out if you don't stim. So if you get spam ragdolled, you might just bleed out on the ground. So we'll just see how this goes overall, and hopefully it just doesn't end up being annoying. Now, next up, we do have some massive nerfs to a couple of enemies. And starting with the bots, we have the Scout Strider leg armor getting reduced from 3 to 2. And when we played the clip of them shooting it with the base Liberator, it rips it up extremely fast. So if you're a stalwart enjoyer like me, that's going to be pretty big. I haven't seen a Scout Strider in a game ever since EOF came out, because only Rocket Striders spawn on tier 10. So I think that this will probably be better for new players overall. I don't really know what prompted this change in general, but maybe they're just preparing for Xbox divers and trying to make like maybe AP2 weapons feel better overall, because I do see a lot of complaints about like AP2. But I think just in general, like, you know, nothing's really going to change in the sense of like you just had to flank the Scout Strider before, which I really liked. So you won't have to do that anymore. They'll just shoot his leg off with pretty much any gun you feel like. And then for Rocket Striders, you're pretty much still going to shoot the rocket because it's going to die faster than the leg. Maybe it'll help in the situations where like it shoots rockets off of one side and then it hides the other rockets behind like a wall or something. You just blow a leg off. So I think overall having more ways to kill an enemy is good, but I'm just wondering how it affects them overall. So we'll have to see. That'll probably take like a couple days to really get a good feeling for it, but I'll make sure I have the guide updated in Discord for them as soon as we figure out how much damage those legs are taking. And the next enemy nerf is probably one of the biggest that we've seen in like a very, very long time. So all the Overseer variants are having their armor value of their flesh reduced from 2 to 1. So these guys have multi-stage armor. If you shoot off their armor plate, then their flesh gets exposed, and that used to be AP2, but now it's going to be AP1, which does mean if you're shooting out with things like the Liberator or the Stalwart, you're not getting any damage reduction anymore, and that leg meta is just going to be crazy. You're going to be tearing these things to pieces insanely fast. So I think overall this is good for the long-term health of the game, making the Overseers a little bit easier to kill. I do think they need to take a little bit more of a look at the Illuminate faction overall as to like what makes them really fun to fight and what people really enjoy about them, because the vast majority of feedback that nobody likes playing against the Illuminate, and making the enemies easier to kill is one way to do it, but I think making your weapons feel more impactful against them is more important. And I think that the next enemy they should really take a look at is the meatballs. Shooting their heads off should have some kind of meaningful feedback when you do blast them all off, because like it just kind of does nothing right now. You just have to like just dump a ton of ammo into this big bullet sponge, and I think that feels really bad when there's a ton of them on the screen, unless you're using some sort of like explosive counter to it. But if you were precise with something and you were sniping all the heads off of the zombies, I feel like you should be rewarded for that in some way, shape, or form, because it would just make sense more than anything else. And I think, again, for me personally, I just want to see like way more zombies spawning, but I don't know how they do that. Either way, I think this is good for the long-term health of the game. Now, moving on, we do have a bunch of weapon changes, and to the one true flag, they made it so that you could plant it in enemies that were still alive instead of dead. So you could just ball out for Super Earth. Now, as for primary weapons, the Pacifier is getting buffed, and it looks like they're standardizing stun across the board again. They're trying to make solo feel better, and then, you know, it might get brought down in format a little bit, but it is what it is. The stun duration is going from 1.5 to 3 seconds, and you're going to have 6 magazines instead of 5. And that stun duration should feel quite a bit better, especially when you're shooting at things like meatballs, for instance. But once we start talking about like, are you really CC locking a whole screen? Are you just trying to kill them? Most of the time it's just better to kill them, so we'll have to see how that goes. I do think that they should increase the magazine size, but maybe that'll be like a weapon attachment thing. But I think when we start talking about the Pummler, this weapon's a lot more interesting than the other stun weapons, because when you shoot it, it explodes at the end point, and that's where the enemies are attracted to. They're attracted to sound. The very first game I ever played with this, I dropped a solo no death run. That was when it first came out, and this was one of the easiest games that I had ever played, because the way that the weapon works is so stealthy and so good. that like overall just felt amazing. And then they stealth nerfed it like a bunch of times, and it was just basically worthless forever. So now that it's getting a longer stun duration and it's had its stun value increased, I'm actually really excited to play with the Pummler over anything else. The Blitzer is going to have more stun value. I don't think that that's going to really matter. I think the Blitzer just in general is just going to either kill the thing or you're not shooting at something that you're trying to stun with it. The Constitution, the bayonet stagger strength increased from 20 to 25. Same thing with the amendment. Bayonets didn't stagger things as much as a punch before, so now this is just going to do that. And that means you should be able to stagger an alpha commander, but we'll see how that goes. Sometimes it desyncs through them because of the way the bayonet works just in general in its hitbox, but again, hopefully that just works out because it'll just be more fun to play. Now, the Warrant, ever since they removed the like overpen that it had, I don't know. I feel like it's been pretty mid, but now it locks onto large size enemies. Either way, I still don't think you'll be using the Warrant the majority of the time, other than to shoot at stuff like Shriekers, which it's actually like really fun to shoot at Shriekers with. Now, as for grenades, the stun grenade that was introduced last Warbond, the Force of Law Warbond, the Urchin had its dagger strength like massively increased. So even though Bile Titans can't be stunned, they showed this thing just knocking it around like crazy, and it looked really, really good because you could throw one of these, you stick it to that Bile Titan, and then it's really just not coming at you for the duration of it. It lasted quite a long time too. So that should be pretty good. And now I'm just wondering, like, the large size enemies, am I going to be able to stagger lock a tank with this? Like, how's that going to work? So that's one of the first things I'm going to test when we go stream this later on. I'm actually really excited because when we use this in a 4-man, we were throwing them on the ground, and the stun threshold like was crazy. Like, it was just stunning pretty much everything that was running over there, like chargers outside of Bile Titans and Impalers, right? And it just created a massive area of control. So with the stagger force being increased, I'm wondering, like, if we could stick these to the ground and have that area denial that we were using before, because this really activates turrets. So I'm actually really excited to see some kind of support stuff getting some love. Now, as for both incendiary grenades, they're going to have their fire duration increased. I'll test that out and I'll probably put it in a later video, but you know, it was like 18-ish seconds before on the normal incendiary grenade, so this will probably take it to like 20 to 25, somewhere in that range, and that's a very long time to have a burning like fire dot on the ground, especially with how strong fire is now. The incendiary impact did have less fuel in it than the regular incendiary, just to note that, so it was about 3 seconds less. So we'll just have to see about that, but either way, bringing these in line with gas is going to be really important in the future, so that way people take more than just gas, right? Just talking about fire, they buffed the shit out of the flame sentry. It's finally flame resistant, which has kind of made sense in the first place, but it's only 95 flame resistant, so it's still just going to be taking ticking damage. And they reduced the cooldown from 150 to 100. The machine gun sentry is at 90 seconds, so like with reductions or whatever, this should feel pretty good. And with the stun grenade, honestly, if we're using the flame sentry, it might actually be able to get some pretty crazy work done, because what the flame sentry was best at this entire time was killing things like Bile Titan. So I'm actually really excited to see what we can do with the flame sentry and how elevated our firefighters build is going to be. We also got a buff to the de-escalator, which is a slight increase in stun value applied to enemies. I am worried about the damage being scaled down from 4-man or whatever, because they are fixing that. And the reason this was so dominant was because it's damage scaled to 4 people, right? Solo, it was like 3 full reloads to kill a Bile Titan to the head, which did not feel good. So hopefully de-escalator isn't completely gutted, but we'll just have to see about that. As for boosters, they're bringing attention to the 2 dead slots of Firebomb Hell Pods and Stun Pods. The numbers that you see are going to be added onto the base Hellbot damage, so that's going to be an increase instead of an overall decrease, which is like good, but I still don't see us taking these basically ever. Now we're into the crashes, fixes, and soft locks or whatever. We'll have to see what they fixed here. I really hope that they fix the thing with weapon attachments crashing when you're switching them in the menu, and like some of the loadouts when you go like load into the game and play, you would just pull the weapon out or aim in and it would just crash your game. So I really hope that they fix that, because that's been a problem for like a month. Well, actually, at that point, but either way, yeah. So we'll have to see about that. And then when we talk about weapon strategies and boosters, they fixed like some weird stuff with the Constitution. some draw holster speed with the gunslinger armor passive, which for some reason has a new problem every single update. I don't really know what's wrong with that passive, but I also do think for that armor passive specifically, they do need to add like increased magazine count like Siege Ready has, because it's just for your sidearm anyways. So I think that with that armor, you're really trying to make your side armor your main weapon, and I think that's something it needs. But either way, I think they'll probably keep looking at it. And then some weird nonsense about weapon grips dropping the entrenchment tool, we'll have to see. And then there's just a bunch of other random fixes. I read through them, and there really isn't anything super notable here. So I hope to see you guys later on the stream. I hope you have a wonderful day.